Well, good morning, good day, good afternoon, whenever you're listening to this. This is MarTalks. I'm your host, Joe Rosenstein. MarTalks is where we discuss contemporary issues in the e-commerce economy. And today we're going to be talking about closing that first transaction for a startup, which is a momentous occasion. And for that, we're joined by three folks that have done it repeatedly. Chris Sternbeck, Brian McGlynn, and Brad Habansky. Thank you so much for joining me today, fellas.
Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting us.
I could go into some detail here for each of your backgrounds, but rather than essentially make stuff up, why don't we hear from straight from the horse's mouth? Mr. Habansky, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've been in tech for a long time. I also started a few businesses of my own, so kind of an entrepreneur, on the side. But spent a lot of time at Oracle and Salesforce, but then I started doing a lot of startups or early stage. In particular, commerce tools. Most recent, well, about 8 years ago, when they first started here in the U.S. Then moved to Elastic Path, another commerce vendor after that, and now I'm with In River today.
Fantastic. Mr. McGlynn.
Yeah, kind of like Brad. I've been in commerce for a while. I've started a few businesses on the side. I spent a long stint at a company called Autonomy with a lot of interesting lessons learned there, probably worth an entire podcast on itself on that one as well. But really a lot about bringing new products to market. I learned a lot there. Was at a small startup called IP.com in the intellectual property space with one of the first AI solutions to market. So I had to bring a new product and a new approach to market. Then Intershop, where I led the Americas business and really had to reboot the business as we went in back in the late 2010s. After that, Coveo, and then at a brand new venture will be released called Wealth Write-Up. So a wealth tech company that I came in recently to lead the organization and take a brand new product, a new company to market. So I've got lots of scars. I won't show anyone the visuals of those, but lots of lessons learned and scars of I can tell people what not to do. And through all that, maybe something what you can do will come out of it as well. So hopefully a little background on myself.
Well, thank you very much for restraining your hideousness. That's very congenial
viewers
of you.
Thanking too.
Yeah. Well, Chris, Mr. Sternbeck, let's tail off with you.
All right.
What's your story, man?
Well, interestingly, I got to go along with the SCAR theme here. 30 plus years at startups, a lot of mistakes made along the way, some victories, and a lot of learning has happened. Silicon Valley startups primarily. Currently 3 years now as CRO at Learn to Win, which is an ed tech play. And it's very relevant because we're selling primarily to large commercial enterprise and the U.S. military. So we had to go through exactly the things that we're about to chat about today at this company.
Well, fantastic. Well, again, thank you for joining me. You grizzled veterans, you scarred enterprise sellers. I one of the most common searches that I've had over my 25 years in recruiting has been working with a founder who needs to hire their very first sales executive because they want to sell a product. And in enterprise software, we're talking about an initial transaction in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, could be over $1 million, but most of the time it's in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's a complex sale. It's a multi-phased sale. It, in today's marketplace, is handled by a committee of buyers on your client side. 5, 7, 10 people have been in the room that each need to be engaged, each have agendas, each have veto power in many cases on a purchase. And these founders need to hire somebody who can run that gauntlet and get their paper to the promised land and get some ink on a contract and deploy that solution for that client. So my first question to the group, and we'll start with Brad, is, you actually sold commerce tools initially in the United States when nobody had heard of composable commerce. Like, what the heck was that? What was that like?
Well, it's hard. I mean, I think that's the first thing is really hard. I mean, that's the first piece of it. I think, Brian, you mentioned you were the inner shop too. I mean, I think that Silicon Valley for commerce is really Germany, if you think about where all the commerce platforms are coming from, and I would say I was a third U.S. employee. And at the time I started there, we had some German customers, but no one that anybody here had heard of. So it was essentially, starting greenfield. We have, so we couldn't really use any of the references that we had in Germany because no U.S. companies had heard of these companies. It was more of a mid-market. Commerce Tools is a mid-market solution in Germany when it started. It wasn't what it is now. I would say the hardest part for us is, what's interesting is Brian mentioned he was an entrepreneur too. I think you need that kind of mindset to start. You got to know it's going to be hard. You got to be able to do it on your own. But selling composable commerce in the early days, when I first started, it wasn't even selling the mock stuff yet, because we came up with that later on. And that was more of a marketing, kind of strategy. And then in the early days, it was just trying to sell a customer on putting the commerce in the cloud. Because at that time, most of the commerce platforms were not SaaS solutions. They were either on premise or they may have been hosted in the cloud by somebody, but it's just a hosted solution. So you really had to sell them on why cloud first, why put it in Google, why. Now it sounds funny to say that now because everybody puts everything in Google or AWS or Azure. But at the time, before I could even sell them on mock or composability, you had to sell them on why put something in the cloud that's that critical. So we started there, and then we learned that we had to learn a lot about the cloud. AWS, we were in Google, so we had to learn a lot about Google. We had to learn a lot about DevOps, about how to deploy into the cloud, because you had to explain and educate a customer on if they're going to go to the cloud and they hadn't had a lot of experience with it, how are they going to deploy to the cloud? How are they going to be able to deploy our software to the cloud? So we learned really quickly that I had to know a hell of a lot more about than just my product I'm trying to sell. We had to know the whole ecosystem. So the cloud ecosystem, then the composable, and then all the CMSs, all the search engines, the customer looked to us to educate them on this market, because they didn't know anything about it. So we learned a lot of things really quick. Like, it's a headless platform. We were trying to go after ATG customers and website. We get them all excited, and then we realize, wait, they haven't decoupled the front end from the back end yet to go headless. That's a 12-month project. So yeah, they want to buy us, but now I got to wait 12 months to decouple it, and then I can sell it to them in a year and a half. So then we started saying, okay, let's go after ones that already have it headless, just to save that time. But it's constantly learning, and honestly, it's screwing up, it's making mistakes, and then it's adjusting very quickly. When Kelly and I started, Kelly's our chief product officer at the time. We would go in with a pitch and a presentation to one customer, and we'd walk out and it didn't work. It didn't go over well. So then we get back in the car, we rewrite it, redo it, and we try it again. We do it over and over. And eventually you find one that does. So it's just iterating quickly and learning, failing fast, almost like they do in software development, right? And that's how we did it. Yeah. But then when you got to the mock stuff, it started getting better, but then no one knew what it was. So we created the whole mock alliance and that sort of thing. But by that time, it had kind of, it was starting to go, but the early days, I'd say, were hard. I think we sold one deal in the first year, and that was lucky, I would say. If I'm honest, right, it was lucky. But I think that's part of it too. You gotta find the right customer and the right champion in the account that's willing to take that risk. Because buying Commerce Tools, 8 years ago, whatever it was a risk. Because think about it, it's Oracle, IBM, and SAP, or with Hybris, where or in a shop, they're all well-known, big. You go out and say, hey, I'm going to move half a billion or $1 billion of revenue onto Commerce Tools, which no one had ever heard of. The person who does that, makes that decision internally, has got to have a lot of conviction behind it, and got to be willing to lose his job, if he's wrong or if she's wrong. Yeah. I could keep talking, but I want to talk the whole time.
Yeah, those are some gems, man. I love that, because when you started out with Commerce Tools, most of the 18 people that I put to work at Demandware were still selling Salesforce Commerce, which was still Demandware at the time, which again was the first cloud-based platform. And even then, not not a headless solution. So you addressed the big enchilada in for enterprise software sellers is that evangelistic sale. Nobody's heard of your company, nobody's heard of your solution. You've essentially you hope you come in with something that the client really is experiencing a problem they're aware of. They already had a commerce platform. They were already selling online. So they had a budget for your solution. It was just, this is a new format. This is a more capable solution. This is a more flexible solution. And even in that situation where the clients had been through buying cycles and were utilizing a product that competed with your own, you had to go through the process of educating them about the cloud, of educating yourself about the limitations of your technology, about when a client was ready to buy your solution, about building that pitch. What was that pitch? How many times does it fall flat? How many times do Kelly's a brilliant guy. The two of you in the room talking to a customer, you'd think anybody with half a brain is going to want to buy from these guys because they know what they're talking about. They're very educated. They're so very spooled up. It's like, nope, maybe not. I mean, and at that point you had 2 decades of experience. It's like, it's a tough nut to crack. But, even worse when a client calls me and says, I need to hire my first customer, my first seller. And I ask them, well, who are your competitors? And they say, well, we don't have any. I'm like, oh, great. Terrific. So there isn't a budget on the planet for your solution, and your clients don't even think they have a problem. So they're going to have to start from absolute scratch on that. So if Chris, you've been in that situation. You've been the guy that's like, hey, I got a problem I want to solve for you that you don't even know about. What's that like?
Yeah, no, great question. And going back to a couple of comments about messaging. Yeah, you'll go in, give your pitch, and parts of it resonate, parts of it totally fall flat. And it's that rapid iteration where you're looking for that vein of gold. What was the part that really got their attention? And, over time you find out that one bullet on slide 5 winds up being half your deck about a year later. That was, I thought it was solving this problem, but it's actually this other thing over here. And then it just keeps fanning it out. And you completely minimize and drop what your original storyline was. And so, yeah, that process nails it exactly. Right. And then the other thing is we've never heard of you. Potentially, we don't know that we have that problem. And so you're fishing around for that. The 2 things that I've learned the last couple of years that were kind of new and different, the classic, pilot program or POC with the land and expand, that's been around forever. And we're doing a lot of those in large enterprise. We've found very few big commercial customers that would bite off a giant chunk right up front, right? But they're willing, to spend a little bit of money if they've agree that they have a problem and they think you can solve it, as long as you frame it properly, good success criteria agreed upon up front, and demonstrate ROI, right? And try to limit it to 2, 3, 4 months potentially. And we've had a lot of success with that. The other thing though that's changed is interesting is that there's a lot of these startup accelerators out there now. And I don't know if you guys have had experience, the Y Combinator and Plug and Play. And it's interesting. They got started really as sources of, seed money, venture capital, maybe access to mentors, but they've really upped their game the last 2 years in terms of providing structured access to innovation teams in large Fortune companies now. I'll give you one example in particular. There's a group called Engage out of Atlanta, and they're a venture capital firm also. But what they've gotten together is 17 of the largest corporations in the state of Georgia that have all paid into this program. And these are large companies that self-selected, like, I want to talk to startups, which is one of our biggest barriers that we have today, right? Most big companies are like, you're the flea on my ass. I'm not going to talk to your company. I never heard of you. These are companies that are like leaning forward, going, there's a lot of innovation out there we want to grab on.
You're an aggressive little bugger too. You won't leave me alone.
Exactly. So,
like,
yeah. So
taking 4 showers and you're still here.
Yep. So we went through the program with Engage. It's a 1-year program, and we are just completing it now. But it's Coca-Cola, it's Chick-fil-A, it's Georgia Pacific, it's Home Depot. I mean, these are giant, great brand names. and they've got dedicated innovation teams that are looking at tech like this. And then the thing that's interesting is your pitch changes dramatically, because I'm sure you two have experienced this as well, where talking about that pitch deck we just did, we're solving an operational business problem for somebody. Innovation teams is kind of interesting because they don't have that exact problem, but what you're trying to do is train them to identify where you can help with somebody with that problem inside the big corporation, and then frame what you're doing in a way where they can convey that message and get that internal customer excited. And so we've had some really good success with that. And as a result of our experience with Engage, we've gone deep with Plug and Play as well, which is now multinational with like 30 locations around the country. And they've broken into industry vertical specialists.
Hey, Chris, sorry, what does Plug and Play do?
Plug and Play got started as like a WeWork for startups, where you could get a cheap office space, access to a printer, a coffee machine, and a bunch of other like-minded crazy people. And they've since expanded. The founder actually housed Google in one of their first offices, and he's had several big wins. And so he keeps plowing that money back in. And now it's a venture capital firm doing primarily seed and early A. They also have locations around the country where you can go rent a cheap office space, the WeWork model, right? But the big thing that they've established is this industry vertical play, where they've got a fintech location. It's centered in New Jersey. They've got a health tech one. They've got the supply chain one is headquartered in Bentonville, Arkansas, thanks to Walmart, right? And they've got these anchor clients in each one of the verticals. And again, these are forward-leaning companies with innovation teams that want to talk to startups. And so our current platform is a horizontal play. It's ed tech, it's training. Our first entrant into Plug and Play was in supply chain. And so we're working with companies that are like big freight brokers and things like that, Nolan Transportation Group, AIT Worldwide, UPS, right? But we've gone horizontal, and now we're in the health and pharma space now. And so we're getting access to companies like Glaxo and Regeneron and Novartis. And we've kind of worked our way across these silos. So whatever niche your product you think is a fit for, you can focus in on that vertical and get access to somewhere between like 5 and 20 big corporations that want to look at your stuff. And they hold one-day events where you can come in and do like a 5-minute speed pitch. It's like speed dating, and like 10 startups will go. And then they've got other ones that are much more focused, where they'll build a whole day for a company's innovation team, and they'll present lots of startup companies, and then they cherry pick the ones they want to meet with and build a day's agenda out of it. And what I can tell you is that you've got these companies are self-selecting to want to work with startups, which is a giant barrier to overcome. Normally, it's a given in this scenario. And then the second thing is they frequently want to do pilots, and they've got budget set aside, and they're looking to do it. And we've wound up doing like 30 or so pilots across different accelerators in the last 2 years. And the conversion rate from pilot to enterprise expansion and annual is around 50%. So it's another tool in the kit that I highly recommend. And there's a bunch of them out there. There's little regional ones. And then there's the Plug and Play is more of a big national play you should take a look at for sure.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, that's fortunate when you've got that's a new, as you said, that's a very new development. It's a very new development. And if you've got the right kind of solution to work with these accelerators, more power to you.
Yeah.
Fantastic. They're typically not going to help a lot of the enterprise offerings, the Johnny-come-latelys in a space. You know, if you've got a new PIM, if you've got a new search solution, if you've got a new personalization solution, you got to go it on your own. Or if you're introducing something truly ground changing, that a completely new way of constructing databases, that good, you're best to try it out on your own. And there's a lot of common. There's a common line that I've heard many times. Hey, the founders need to close those first few deals themselves before they hire a salesperson. And with enterprise software, where you've got a very large transaction that's got the CFO involved, and you're selling to an enterprise that's $1 billion plus, if you haven't got a background in sales, that could be pretty challenging. And Brian, I think you've dealt with that.
Yeah.
I think you've been in that situation. Tell us a little bit about your experiences there.
Certainly going through, when we look at it starting out, I remember it was an interesting part. I'll go back to the Intershop story, where Intershop, a storied brand, certainly in Germany, went public back in 1997. I think they had a $7 billion market cap at one part. And well, Stefan Schambach left the group. He ended up going through, started Demandware. He obviously did very well on that one. But Intershop kind of, I candidly think, lost its way. I think a lot of others would be fair to say that part as well. I got asked to come in 2016 initially to lead the Americas business, which before I came aboard, I don't think they closed a deal in 10 years. They really were living as more of a managed services outfit for a set of accounts that were candidly good. But at this part, you can only write a book so long at this part before you are going to hit the areas where it declines. So we had to go in and really reboot and retool. And I came in as a VP of sales, and I was a sales team of one initially. Ended up going through and had great sales support, had SDRs and others. And first thing I looked at was their way of selling was take an RFP, because we did appear based on their historical brand, and swing what we would swing the bat and see if we hit. Well, we had a good batting average of 0, unfortunately. Really good responses. And it was always that obsession of, but the product is great. It does great things. Why can't we go and close customers? Why can't we bring on customers? Daryl, you brought it out. It's like, when you go into a CFO, the challenge I always went into was like, okay, you're a great German company. How do you support us? How do you support the US in this part? And we were publicly traded. All our dirty laundry was out. Our size and everything else was there at this part. So a lot of it really took, how do we retool and kind of reboot a brand at this part in the Americas market? So it took an approach where we went through and they initially, I went in and we didn't have a GM in the business. We split between Australia and the US. They were crazy enough to give me the car keys and said, okay, we're going to do the first in Intershop history. We're going to appoint a sales guy to lead the organization. So I stepped in at this part and said, all right, let's go in. Who's the sales guy? Well, GM and chief sales guy. So part of it was, we need to go and get our first customer win. How do we go in and demonstrate that we are relevant in the market and we can solve a market? And candidly, our biggest competition, we had SAP, we had Oracle, we had other really established players that were in that large enterprise space. Part of the thought was, do we want to go mid-market, down-market? Well, candidly, it was an enterprise solution. And doing a couple of pitches came very clear that large enterprise customers understood cost of implementation, the investment, change management that need to be made. So there was definitely a fit. We just had to go in and find a vertical fit and get a really good story on that part. And Chris and Brad, you both pointed out well, so many times we take a pitch deck. Nope. Me and Andre Myhorn go back in the car, fix it, go to another place. And it really came down to, was it an approach where we take a whiteboarding approach and go through and really understand, okay, deconstruct a company's business problems and understand what was really good about it. Well, interesting enough, the product had been built around GSI Commerce, who had done some work to really make it not multi-tenant, but multi-tenant within a tenant at this part. So we could handle what we found out. Okay, what about a holding company with massive sets of operating companies that want to go in and standardize? That's where we found an interesting fit, where we can go in and work with a company and do a massive land and expand, find a visionary within a client. And we had to go in and find those risk takers, the ones that are saying, all right, we're going to go in and risk and reward. Who wants to go out and say, all right, I see fundamental changes. I see an amazing product. I'm going to put my salary, I'm going to put my job on the line and invest in this German company that hasn't had a big US presence to come in and solve problems and go forward and work with that. So we had to do a lot of market exploration, but we went in and landed a couple of pretty big deals that we ended in. And one was public. Danaher was actually one of our first clients that came in. And Amit Gupta did a lot of talking about how he came in and selected, but had the vision at least to say, let's bring in one of our operating companies that allowed this to expand to, I think they had 20 some odd opcos that were part of it. So we went in, built a template, were able to expand, and then looked at other companies that were similar, other ones in the space, and really built a play around that. And that's how we were able to scale the company. But it was really a case where I look at it, you have to have a sales mind as a GM. That's why they tapped me, I think. And certainly I felt was a good part to go in. It was less about, we had to manage EBIT. We had to manage all the components that were out there. I had to manage contracts, but a growth mindset and then an entrepreneurial mindset. And I think that's the part where all of us have gone into is like, all right, it's okay to, I don't look at fail fast. I don't say fail. I really like the quote by Thomas Edison as opposed to fail fast. Somebody asked them, I said, you failed 10,000 times to try to build a light bulb. Why'd you keep at it? He's like, no, 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 no. I didn't fail 10,000 times. I found out 10,000 things that don't work. And that was essentially the way I look at it, is that, okay, we went in there and yeah, we'll try. We had a hypothesis. Here's a market. We tried the B2C commerce world with Intershop. It didn't work. It was too crowded. We didn't differentiate. We went in, except for very few parts, the B2B commerce, distributed manufacturers, like, wow, we have OMS. We have all these parts that are in there. We have the ability to do very complex catalogs and other parts. I hired somebody from one of our customers that was looking for a job, and it was an area we now went out in the field and were able to articulate what did at this part. And that's really where I think that mindset that you guys talked about, it really makes it to where, okay, we're okay to go in and test. We have to test. We had to build a licensing model that was brand new based on consumption. Then funny enough, others copied that because I had to align the ROI with our customers. Like, well, we're not getting a lot up front. I said, I understand, but look at the run, what we got to go into, what we need to do to partner with our clients. So it was completely that, throw everything out the window, try things new, break things, go out and take a lot of hits in the head that things didn't necessarily work, and then go back and land that lighthouse account that grows internally, and then go find others afterwards.
Well, so we've really discussed two German-based startups that had clients with names and installs in Europe, and buyers in the United States, educated people, CEOs, CIOs, CFOs, gave no credibility whatsoever to that, didn't care. So you essentially had to build a brand in the United States, introduce your product, and then go through 6 months, a year of pitching before you finally got a client that was willing to sign on the bottom line. You know, that's a rugged story. It's a tough one because those are both established companies, and even then, with referenceable clients in a westernized nation, it was like starting from scratch. So, I guess from your perspective, and we'll swing back to Brad here. What do you think a founder needs to know about their market and about what they're going to need to do from a marketing perspective if they're going to hire a sales executive for an enterprise software product for the first time?
So I'd say a couple things are important. One is your ICP, and the second one is hiring the right salesperson, because what you'll learn, and I think probably all of us started as sales reps, and is that there's different kinds. Like I worked at Oracle and Salesforce for a long time, and I did fine, did well there. But a lot of people do well there, right? You know, if you have a playbook, it tell you how to sell. They have a process, everything's in place. It's just like plug and play, put a person in there. It's not that simple, but the process is there, and how to sell it and the market to go after. If you start with a new product where a lot of times the founders believe they know what the market is or their ICP is, but it's usually not what you end up finding out it is. You got to have a salesperson that can figure it out on his own, you know. And so I learned about myself. I was better at selling things that are hard to sell, you know, because there was a lot of other salespeople that couldn't do that, you know. So I started gravitating more towards new products, even within Oracle or Salesforce, before I went off on it, because I found that a lot of people didn't want to do it, and I was better at it. Me personally, you know, it was better at my skill set, you know. So you got to find the salesperson that has that skill set to be able to. And I think there's that entrepreneur side. There's that just figuring it out on their own. Like you could put 4 new reps out there at a startup, and one of them figures it out, the other 3 won't. You know, so it's hard to find that person. You know.
That's about right. That's about right.
You know, but it's not because anything other than that person just figured it out how to sell it. Yeah. You know, they figured out how to sell it, and then you replicate it to everybody else, and after that, it's easier. You know, but somebody's got to figure out how to sell it. You know, and it's never I don't say never the founder, but it's probably not going to be the founder that figures out how to sell it. And it's probably going to be a different ICP than they think, and it's probably going to solve a different problem they thought it was going to solve. You know, so that's kind of that side, but the marketing piece is key. I mean, they got to invest in marketing too. You can't go into a new market and just expect a salesperson to be able to do it. I mean, especially now, I think I read somewhere that 80% of the sales cycle is now done digitally, you know, before they even talk to a salesperson. So if you're not out there with a digital presence, I mean, you're not going to, by the time you get in, it's too late because everybody else is already in there, set the table for you, and you're not going to have a chance. So I don't think you can do it nowadays. Back when I did it, we also hired a VP of marketing at the same time, and that was great. I mean, I wouldn't probably take a job as a startup if they didn't do that in whatever market you start in. Any new market, they don't put a marketing presence there or tell you how they're gonna, what their plan is for that market. It's probably gonna not succeed. And then I think you need your technical resource. You need an SE of some kind to help to kind of be in there with you, whoever that might be. Those are the things that I think you really have to invest in. If they don't, they're not serious about the market anyways. They're just trying to see what they can get. So that would be my thing. Find the right salesperson, and nowadays you got to invest in marketing. That's how it's. I'm getting older, so things evolve, but you got to stay up on it. And right now, all the digital marketing is the key, and how they do it. Things like 6 Sense and things that you can look at for see who's in market. They got to invest in the tools. They got to go out there and do the marketing, the digital marketing, all the things that drive the top of the funnel. Because it's not as easy you can't just pick up a phone and cold call anymore. People don't pick up the phone. You can still do it, but it's not like it was before. So that you really you can't just go at it kind of like omni-channel and in retail. They got to go for a multi-channel approach to it in order to be successful. That's just the two things I would say, I guess. Yeah.
Well, what you just described in terms of being the first entrepreneurial seller in an organization, that's who they're hiring. Mm-hmm. Their first true entrepreneur, the person who's just all about the risk. And you're addicted to risk. You're like, those guys that you see on extreme sports. Why the heck would a guy jump off a cliff with a parachute when he knows if he doesn't pull it out in 2 seconds, he's going to smash on the bottom? It's like, because he's good at it. He likes it. So, you're a good kind of freak, Brad. You're my kind of freak. I've spent, 25 years trying to find those people, and it's hard to put my finger on it, but there's a certain I don't know, cavalier approach to risk. I dig it. I dig going where, because nobody's been there before, because it's new. And a lot of entrepreneurs, when they're starting out and they know they're close to a space, it's like, my product is going to attach to something from Oracle or SAP or Salesforce somewhere. So I can hire somebody from Oracle or SAP or Salesforce to sell my product because it's going to be the same customers. It's like, yeah, good luck with that. That person was essentially an acquirer somewhere in the 17th row, and they were being conducted, and their voice was accompanied by another 150 voices. So yeah, they were technically there performing, but without the rest of the ensemble, they would have been pretty off key and fell flat on their face.
I always tell my wife when I start about the risk is like, either I'm going to figure it out in 12 months or they're going to fire me.
Yeah.
So she knows going in. Hey, it's hit or miss. It's like, there's no.
I'm sending her some flowers.
One of the two things will happen. Yeah.
I'm going to send her some flowers at the end of this, because she supported you and you've done some amazing things.
Oh, then we're going to have shitty benefits, because every startup has shitty benefits. So you're going to have a good medical plan. You're not. So it's like you may not even have one. Or you have to figure out one your own. So all those things you got to kind of prepare your family for, before you do it. They got to know what's coming when you get into it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for a startup founder, they're expecting not to have a life. They've kind of said, yeah, I've got pictures of my kids on my desk, so I remember what they look like when I get home, if I get home. And their first seller definitely knows that as well. It's like, I'm going to kind of live on a plane. People are going to forget what I look like. They're going to forget my name. Who are you? Yeah, I live here. Yeah. Yeah. What's that ring? Okay. But to your point, and I'm gonna pivot back to Brian on this. Brad is, you're pretty much of the mind, hey, unless the company is actually going to hire your marketing partner at the same time, so budgeting the same amount for marketing as they are for sales from the get-go, they're going to fail, because the market is too sophisticated, because the digital selling portion of the equation is now 70% of the transaction process. So unless you have a marketer who's going to seed the ground, who's going to build the tools that your sellers are going to use to engage the client, to begin to qualify those clients, to build the brand, to create the awareness, the seller is not going to have time. And one of the things I would also share is when you have somebody with the horsepower in sales of Brian or Brad or Chris, the least productive thing for them to be doing is to be serving as a business development representative where they're picking up the phone and calling people, because that's not going to work 99% of the time. It's just a waste of talent, and it's a waste of time. So with that, Brian, tell me a little bit about what you think a company, what your experience has been with companies that get it in terms of marketing and companies that don't, that haven't sold a product yet.
You're really good point, and very salient too. Parts where we always run into is there's a careful balance, and I think, Brad, you hit it well. There's marketing, there's sales development, and I sat there and you look at it with a mature company, and so many times I've gotten in, people will do kind of an immature company. Here's our sales projection, here's where we want to be. How many AEs, what can they reasonably close, and all these particular parts that are out there. People will go in, put it all together on a beautiful spreadsheet and fail, burn a lot of cash, just because there's still that understanding of where it happens to be. There's a certain cost to market exploration. That's what I'll call it. You have market exploration, and you have kind of scale up. So 0 to 1 customers, 1 to 3 customers, then kind of 5 to 10, there's different steps. And 10 plus, you're now got a machine. You can run it, you can meter it, you can do a lot of things. But that really 1 to 5 sort of range that you're getting into, the way I look at it is an ideal part. You absolutely need marketing. You need a lot of a reasonable amount of content to tell your story, because people are going to hit 70%. So you need to tell your story and your differentiated view and have an opinion. That's the good part about being a startup, is I've always appreciated, even my autonomy days, it's probably what corrupted me. You got to tell people why they're wrong, or why everyone else just doesn't get it and your company does, and those that buy in or don't. So you got to get that point of view out there. So there's a marketing component that does that. And then a sales part, when you look at it, us, my age, anyone who's got this experience, us entrepreneur guys, we love to pitch. We love to go in and take items out there. We're also not the cheapest people in the world. So it's really a great part is you want to go in, find young talent. You want to go and mentor and bring in. So you need an SDR. You need somebody that's going to go in and grind to, okay, maybe it's working Apollo. Maybe it's working some of the tools like this to go in and get meetings, going in and run the mechanics to ultimately go in and get you in front of a meeting. So I look at it as when I go on a plane, I don't want to go for one customer. I want 5 customers. I want to make certain that I'm on the plane, I'm taking advantage of my time. Because any times I can at least get 5 at-bats, I can tweak the message, I can go back, I can check it the next day, I can go in there. And that's really where I look at is an SDR as an efficiency multiplier. So I remember one startup, the board coming to me saying, hey, we can get you a couple more AEs. It's like, I don't want more AEs. I say, what I need more support. When I understand the business, then I can say, now I can scale. I understand what a sales cycle looks like. I understand what the buying group looks like. I understand our ICP. I can build it. But until I get really that exploration done, which may be 6 months, maybe a year at this part, it's an understanding to say, all right, here's my lean, mean marketing machine, SDR, a digital marketing person, not a CMO, someone that can go in and run the channels. Let's get out there and test it. And that's kind of my
Chris,
recipe.
I know that you've been in this situation where you've got a company that doesn't yet understand, okay, you've hired a sales executive. We need to make that investment at the same time in marketing to prepare the ground. And that if you don't have someone that is essentially supporting you from an SDR perspective, it's really making it very difficult for you to iterate the pitch. You have to be the person who builds that initial pitch, builds that initial presentation deck, builds that initial process, identifies who are we going to engage at our client? What are their what are we going to have to do for each of these buying and the CFO, the CTO, the CIO, the VP of sales, the chief marketing officer, everyone. We're going to have to do a separate presentation for each of them because they have different agendas. What is your argument been to get more marketing?
To me, it's kind of a cycle, and it's the three parties in it are there's the salesperson on point, there's the marketing, and then there's that SDR function. They each have a different kind of a role, right? The SDR, you want to leverage them to get as many at bats as possible, right? So you can do that iteration. And so if you're spending a lot of your time trying to get those meetings versus doing those meetings, you get less at bats. So it's a force multiplier. Now, one of you guys put that perfectly, right? But the SDR needs messaging to get those meetings, right? And they're going to get that from the marketing guys. And then your job as the point salesperson, or whoever your point salesperson is to bring feedback on the current messaging back to marketing and go, this part resonated, this part sucked. They were really glommed onto this piece. Let's try to expand it. Marketing's job is to then take that, mold the clay, feed the new weapons into the SDR, let them try to get new meetings so you get those at bats again. So it's a really cyclical thing. And the faster you can iterate, the more often you can iterate, the faster the messaging evolves, and you win faster, right? So that's really been my experience. If you're missing any of those three, it's less efficient. If you're missing, one of the two big ones, marketing or that sales point person, you're just going to fail, right? The evangelist, engineer, founder, they can espouse the vision, but they're not really salespeople, and so they can't do this motion that we just described very well. But the one last comment I wanted to make, though, going back to an earlier comment about that first sales hire and how unique that person is, the number one trait that really kind of calls it out for me, and on top of the energy and charisma and everything else, is the curiosity. They have to be really, really, really curious people to engage in just pure discovery conversations and not even know where they're going to lead. And you're trying to suss out where is your business pain? It may not be anything I had on my deck, but we're going to find some business pain that I can apply this thing that I have to your world, right? And curiosity, I think, is really the number one trait.
That's been the defining characteristic that I've found. Is finding the seller that is they've got a huge tolerance for risk, and they live for that thrill. They're curious. They're telling me about all the different news cycles that they're following within the technology community, things that are on the other side of the planet from whatever offering they're spending their time on. They're aware of it. They're excited about it, so that when they go to work in their niche or their space, they can fire on all cylinders. Well, I think unfortunately we've come to closing thoughts because this is cool. I could listen to initial sales process till the cows come home. Actually, the dog's already here somewhere. Anyway, he's been quiet for the last few minutes. Thank goodness. Well, Brad, do you want to leave us with anything on advice for CEOs?
Yeah, I was thinking. What I was thinking about is like what makes them successful and what doesn't. But I think when I had my first successful one, after it was done, I patted myself on the back, saying, "I built this thing. I'm probably the best. I'm the best salesperson in the world, or whatever." But then you go do it again, and something similar, and it doesn't work, and then maybe another one works, and so you start thinking, okay, maybe it wasn't just me that did it. Maybe it was the team. And I think that's what you learn. So I think now when I look at it, it's the team that's so important. You got to get the right marketer, because a big company marketer is not the right one. You need one that's tactical, and you got to get the right SDR, you got to get the right SE, you got to get the right everything, right? They all have to work together, and you can be the best salesperson in the world, but if you don't have those, you can't do it yourself. So I think looking back, I had a lot more appreciation for everybody around me. I think in the moment you're patting yourself on the back, right? But as you learn and you go do one that doesn't work, and you start seeing, okay, I'm still the same person I was before and the same salesperson, but what was different? And then you start seeing It's how you all work together. And we had a really good team. The ones we had the great teams on did well. And it was probably less about the product, but it was a team. So I guess that's my self-awareness,
there is no I in team. Yeah, it is. People tend to put all the weight on the sales professional, on the salesperson, because they're the one that actually gets to push the contract across the table and get the ink on it. But it's a team effort. In enterprise sales especially, it takes a team that can think together, that can share ideas, that can gain consensus, that enjoys the interplay of this idea was great, this idea stunk, how can we come up with a better idea, and that interchange. And that's new for a company that's the entire team up until that point had been completely obsessed with how do we make the product not break, how do we make the product better, how do we improve our code, how do we make it more efficient, how do we put it in the cloud, how do we scale it. This is a whole new muscle that's being added to the body of the company to bring it to market. Brian, any closing?
And Brian, you mentioned Andre. I worked with Andre for overlapped. He's great. Yeah.
Any closing thoughts for us, Brian?
Actually, it's funny. Brad, you bring up Andre. You're talking about a great guy to work with and a team. It's a city. I mean, you look at it with enterprise sales, all different aspects of it. Kind of my thoughts too for founders that are really going in. There's a real interesting part with personality of a sales team or a commercial team. I go in there to say your first go-to-market team. There's one thing I learned was about the imperfect product. So you've got people trying to get a product out there. You've got sales. You need to have that back and forth where salespeople, certainly entrepreneurial salespeople, say, you know what, I got a product that may have a couple words here, but it's absolutely amazing at this part and it solves a problem, and be opinionated about it. That was Andre. Opinionated about it, passionate about it. And I look for that passion, because when you're talking and pitching something new and you're out there, you got to love it. You got to be obsessed with wanting to solve that problem for a customer your way, and then be credible as to about where things are within the area. But at the same time, just fall in love with it. You got to love the product. You got to love the problem. And that's really that part with a founder or a product person going in and really hitting a salesperson. Andre was that product person. And that's kind of where we go into it. Love the product, brought the sales part and built things around it. It's all right. The two of us, when the amount of time we spent, our wives would joke about more time on the road in front of customers, seeing each other, than we did did probably at home in this part. So we're constantly on planes going back and forth. But you know what? That's what it took. And we got there. And it was really that view of, all right, a little bit of give and take. So my parting thoughts for founders is really, it's finding that person who's going to partner with you. You want in a founding team that you really see as, all right, they're going to love what I've built. They're going to take what I've built. They're going to understand it's not perfect, but they're going to love it anyway and bring it out there. And that's really what I find is success in this part.
Warts and all, you got to love it. Warts and all, you got to love it. You got to be passionate about it. Chris, what can you share for some final pearls of wisdom for a founder that needs to hire their first sales executive and commercial team? Let's put it that way. We've established putting in place their first commercial team.
Yeah, no, good. You hit the word I was thinking of, which is that they have to have that passion, right? That they've got this thing that they're convinced can add value to their customers or prospects, and they've got passion and they go evangelize it, basically. But in the structured iteration way that we've been talking about, right? And then the second piece is the product piece. They need to be agile along with that cycle we talked about with the messaging, because you don't build it and then go message it. You message it, figure out what resonates, and then go, okay, I got 5 companies that all like this part. Now we got to build it, right? So, or at least build a minimal viable, showable feature to see if that scratches that itch or not. And that's actually that fourth step in that cycle that you're doing. It just doesn't iterate quite as frequently as the sales side, right? But it's really about, really good communication between those departments, a good alignment, right, around what they need to get done and what's important. And then the product evolves as rapidly as the sales messaging, and it gets really, really fun when you finally find that pattern and they go, I got it. Repeatable sales motion, with the product I can solve this problem with, and then you can scale. And that's really what we're all looking for in the beginning part, right? So it's just the last comment I've got really is it's a lot of fun. We talked about our scar tissue, but you've just got to have a certain mentality to go in there and beat your head against the wall for this long. But it's super fun. I just enjoy the race. It's a race of solving the problem and building a business versus running out of money and raising that next round, right? So you got to enjoy the pressure and also enjoy the battle itself, or it'll burn you out.
Well, I find it to be a tremendous amount of fun being able to talk to you guys like you every day. That's what I've been doing this for a couple decades, is people that are passionate about what they're doing, curious as all heck, and are a little adventurous, reckless, a little bit of a pirate. That's that kind of captures in a nutshell what it is to be the first sales executive or member of a commercial team for a startup. And I'm glad I got to spend some time today with you pirates. Thank you so much. All right. Well, that was awesome, guys.
Yeah.
That we really pulled it together there at the end, in particular.